Professor Nagamallika ma'am, she heads the Department of Communication at the English and Foreign Languages University, which is a central university in Hyderabad. She has nearly 30 years of teaching experience at several state and private universities. Ma'am is a junior research fellowship awardee who immediately after her post-graduation in journalism has been awarded JRF and directed her career towards education. She has published in international journals and has contributed chapters in edited volumes.
Actually an antidote to whatever she was talking about, and this has more figures and more numbers than what she was already mentioning. I have to make a disclaimer. This is only about the report which was there, and she was already speaking to you about it. This is about the GMMP project of which I was a part of, a small part of it. And so I thought it was very, very important for all you students to know about it. Although it is there in the public domain, I'm not sure how many of you would have actually gone through it. So I thought I'd just take you on a quick. Women in media are there in the top positions, of course, but not as much as women, but still, they are there. But according to the 2019, please remember that whatever happens in the media today, or whatever is happening in the media today, will have to be seen as a pre and post-COVID situation. So whatever they were talking about in 2019 may not be true today. But still, if you look at it, you find that there are women in the leadership positions. But as ma'am was already talking about it, it's much better in the digital portals and magazines and television than in newspapers, unfortunately, which is what we call as a class ceiling. And of course, class, caste, and the rest of it plays an important role. And last but not the least, the COVID situation, which definitely brought about a lot of drastic changes. And I think that was one of the main reasons for the fall in the number of journalists in general and women in particular in journalism today. It is ironical that yes, we do have some women who are still not represented in the media, but on the other hand, we also have women who are so well known, like our own Uma here, and they have won awards, they've done fantastic work, but this is the dichotomy and dualism we always see in the media today. Okay, this is about the project I was talking to you. This is a global media monitoring project which began in 1995. It's a voluntary project or a set of volunteers across the world, across the globe, monitor all the media on one day, just one day. Every 5 years this exercise happens. So from 1995 we've been doing this exercise, and it's been done every 5 years. So 2020 was the last. Right? So you can just see the number of countries which have started to participate in it. And Network of Women in Media India has been collaborating with them from 2010. And I took part in 2010 and again in 2020 as a volunteer coder. Right? So in all this time in 2020, we had Padma Charsha ma'am and Amal Joseph ma'am to lead this project from India. As you can see, there are 116 countries, but I'm sure there are not many countries which have so much of variety in terms of media and numbers as much as in India. So because we have so many languages and so many television, so many media itself, that it becomes a very rich source of information. So we were actually one of the few countries which had done more than what was required, because we did have a different, a range which was very unheard of for many other countries. So you can just look at the number of newspapers and television, radio channels, so internet as well as Twitter handles we have looked at. I just done one day. The one day usually is chosen in the month of March, April, but the criteria being that it should be a normal day. It should not have any extraordinary events or anything which is like a calamity or anything. Because we would like to see on an average day what is the kind of coverage which women have in media. But if you go back and look at 2020, there was nothing like an ordinary day. I think every day was extraordinary because of the so many situations we had to face. So finally that got postponed and we did it only in September. Right, so because we thought if we missed that out, it would be difficult. So after a lot of discussions and debates, we started doing it in September. So we, at the end of it, there were 735 stories which were looked at. And these were the major categories under which it was divided. We were looking at the stories under these 8 categories. Now you have to remember that this gender and related stories was a new addition. It was only now that 2020 that this new category was included in this whole thing. If you look at it in these things, I have highlighted the gender and related and celebrity. These are the 2 where you get the relatively more number of stories where females are seen. Now if you look at the kind of difference between male and female, which is what I was also talking about, you can see the presence of women in the new stories. Okay, but then if you look amongst the female representation across the different categories, you can see that it is gender related and in celebrity, arts, media and sports. Now I think we can more or less understand what that means. So if you look at the overall percentage, which is again what I was talking about, there was a drastic fall in the number of, in the percentage of women from 15 to 20, 10 to 15 to 20. You can just see how the presence of women has come down, and it is almost by 10% that has fallen, and the only reason can be again COVID, because there have been a lot of layoffs. There were so many women who could not come back, and of course the media houses were also not willing to take them back, and because of the situation outside, many of the women preferred not to come back. And in general, of course, there was a lot of unemployment. So all these things led to this drastic fall in the situation. Whether to call it normal or not so normal is something we cannot say as of now. So this was where we see that even if they are represented, women, the highest in gender related, it could be mostly related to gender related violence, because I will just show you the kind of stories which were included in the under gender and related. Okay, this is in internet and Twitter. Again, you see the same 2 categories which have the better percentage. But then you can see that, now look at the gender and related category. What are the kind of stories that were included in that? So it is about sexual harassment, rape, sexual assault, gender violence, femicide, trafficking. So you can see the kind of stories which were included in that, and that got the highest traction. Right? Now in that, so it's, although we are having numbers are very high and representation we think is high, but what is the kind of representation we are seeing? That also matters. I'm just giving a small example here to look at the kind of, this I think all of us are aware of it. So you can see that there is a Dalit girl which is mentioned, but we do not really know who did this. You can see that there is an absence of the persons who have perpetrated it, but the highlight is of the girl, and I think it's also because she's a Dalit girl. Right? So in this kind of stories, you see that there is a deliberate absence of the subject, and only it's given in a passive voice, which means that you do not really want to highlight who are the perpetrators. Obviously, because we now know the whole story, I don't need to repeat that. Now, if you, again, I was talking about it, when you find them as news sources, you can see that almost in more than 77 of the stories, you find that there were no sources of the 933. No sources mentioned, and of them, if you want to identify who they are, it gets very difficult. We really don't know what women are, what is their position, because nobody wants to talk about it because they don't think it's important enough. So you can see that the number, the percentage of in stories where women's occupation or what they were was actually mentioned. Again, you can see here, this is a very interesting story of Just look at the headline, Purushottam Sharma removed and action taken after video of him beating his wife went viral. Who is this Purushottam Sharma? You look at he's a senior police official. So we don't really find, again, what he is, his position, because here it matters. It's the man's position where he is the perpetrator, and so we are not going to see who he is or talk about who he is. So these are the kind of things which are very subtle, but then they do matter. If you look at this again, if you see that who are these people who function as, the functions actually as to what they are, even if you have women in the stories, and if you want to identify them as spokesperson, experts, or if you want to look at them as eyewitnesses or anything where you are going to talk about who is the person whom you are going to interview, you'll find that, look at the last one, there are 19 eyewitnesses but no women in that. So they do not really constitute a credible source, right? So you have only, of the 239 in the entire stories, 239 stories only had spokespersons, and of that only 8% were women. So we tend to give more importance to males. So if you look at again, what I was once again mentioning, this is the only place where we find that television has a place where the age of the women also matters. Who are the ones who are more interesting? You can always guess. So women between the ages of 19 to 34 were found to be more on television, but in print you had the age group from 65 to 79. So we do not want, or we don't prefer going to the older women because visually they are not as appealing as younger women. At least that is what the one-day stories had told us. Yeah. So and then again, when you go to court, people who are the people who would like to quote, obviously it will be the males who would like to go and give quotes about. This also shows, this may not be purely biased, but it also shows that, earlier in 2015 there was a slight difference where they found that it was both men and women who were in-law, father-in-law, wife, that kind of a thing. And so you find this kind of a status, and but for the females more than in the males. Males, you don't really say so and so, father of so and so, unless there is a crime involved, which is this. So look at the headline here. Husband had affair with several women claiming to be single, and the mother-in-law is telling the daughter-in-law. I mean, this is a ridiculous story, which I was actually found it really funny, but then it is true. It is reported, and you can see that how the whole issue of the mother-in-law is telling the daughter-in-law, and where is this kind of a status which you are giving to the woman? And look at the word parinita is also used. So, I mean, these are several things which are giving a stereotypical image of how a woman is, or what she is, or what she is in relation to others. And so it's a, I don't know what kind we can call this as a story. Yeah, so if you're coming back to this journalists and reporters themselves, you'll find that 52% of reporters and presenters are women in TV stories, which again is visually, because women are visually more appealing, than in radio, where you have 20% and 13% in print. This again is a decline from 2015 when it was 43%. So you can see the sharp decline where people have lost jobs. And COVID is a main factor for all these things. And of course in Twitter and internet you do find quite a few, because now I think post-COVID or even during COVID they could work from home. That was one advantage people had, but nobody wants to be on the field anymore. Yeah, so again you see the same thing even in foreign news, international news, wherever you see there is a sharp decline in the number of female reporters. And that's why I think Uma is rare in that sense, that she could continue her her long career, and she is one of the top journalists today in India. Yeah, so these are some of the things which you can see that, yeah, 80% of the stories have reference to gender equality and inequality, human rights. So these are hardly seen anywhere. They are not really mentioned because most of the stories rely on making it more sensational than giving a proper, direction to it. So if you look at that, 71% of economic stories, most of the economic stories, it was mostly the economic stories which had this kind of an angle about human rights and policy and legislation, but none of the other stories even looked at that. So, and it is very interesting to see, actually it is heartening to see that it is women who are reporting on politics, gender, crime and all that. They are the people, or the women are the ones who mention equality and rights frameworks more than the males. So I think women in general are more conscious of these kind of things because we all know that we are on the other side of the fence, and so we need to be, or we are on the same side of this table as the victims, and so we tend to talk about human rights more than the males who are really indifferent to it most of the times. And yeah, finally, so if you look at why this gender perspective is missing, I think most of the reasons we do know, we are aware, but what do we do about it is something which we need to question. So obviously they are underreported, although we make up 50% of the population, we are not really represented in anywhere, politics or anywhere else, except in maybe, and they're heard, and they're not really heard as experts or professionals. We really do not count on them as being professionals, or we don't give much credence to them as much as we tend to believe a male. And that I think is culturally what we've been tuned to. So it gets very difficult for anybody to ask to look at a female as being as much as a professional as a man. And of course, forget about making in the decision-making positions, you hardly find them anywhere at all. And because of that, you don't find obviously many in the decision-making process, and you find that there has been a reduction in the number of reporters as well as news subjects and everywhere from of women. And yeah, you can see the last point where women are seen least in the politics and government and in economy. Obviously, those are the two most important power-yielding sectors where we hardly find women. As she said, we are seen mostly with all the finer tasks, and that is where we are mostly associating women with. And I don't want to make it more and more bad news, but then we can see that we do have a lot of women who are really good, who are made significant marks, and they've done fantastic work. But still, you don't find that many of the, I'm not again saying it's across, but many of the, employers are not really willing to hire them at all costs. And we see that in the last few years, I've seen many of the top anchors quitting their jobs and then they're starting on their own, which may be a good thing, but then why are they quitting is the answer we should all ask. Thank you.